Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Zach Drew.
And I'm Andrew Bellers.
There's a lot of stuff happening in the news this week. We want a couple of really tackle some of the major things that we believe you need to know about. The first one on the list is that there is a blatant attack on nationalism. Last week in Houston, actually, there's an article here. Trump declares himself a nationalist, and CNN says it's racist. So therefore, think about this. If you're a nationalist, if you love your country, if you love America, if you love what this country is founded upon, you are now labeled as an evil, racist bigot. I mean, just let that sink in. You see, this is what the left, who owns the majority of our news outlets, who fund and control Hollywood, and lead the majority, really the majority and the most prominent universities in America. This is what they would have you think. This is what they're infiltrating the minds of the youth. They want you to believe that if you're a nationalist, if you love America, then you're a racist. Let me tell you right now that if their agenda is fulfilled, if the end game is fulfilled, if they can get you to hate your country, America, the outcome of that is absolutely horrific. It's literally within biblical proportions. We're talking about the Antichrist. We're talking about a whole new world order. We're talking about globalists leading the world.
Yeah, and really I think it's so common sense to me that you would think that I should hold the interests of my nation, the one that I live in, above the interests of people outside of these borders that I don't know. It's so common sense, and it makes me really just believe that there is a blanket of deception over this country. I mean, for you to use, for you to use compassion as sort of your justification for saying that people outside of our borders, their interests are higher and more important than the people inside of our country, the only way I can do that is to chalk it up to just blatant deception.
Yeah. And another big thing that we want to talk about this week is this invasion. We are literally about ready to be invaded as a nation. You need to understand this. This isn't a caravan on the southern border. This isn't a caravan. This isn't migration. This is an invasion on our southern border. And let me tell you right now that there is a lot of money behind it, and there is a clear political agenda behind it. You know, it's a plot to destroy our southern border. You know, this is what we're looking at right now is a caravan of soon-to-be tens of thousands of people making their way to America. And let me tell you right now, if you think thousands and thousands of Hondurans suddenly just decide to march over 2,000 miles to our border right before the midterm elections with cameramen, and it not being staged, if it's not all driven by a political agenda. Let me tell you right now, I got some real great swampland for you in Florida to buy. The left in America has been given a spirit of madness. Deuteronomy 28:28. This is actually a judgment of the Lord, is that you'll be given a spirit of really insanity, of madness, that really even Isaiah 5:20, you will call the good things evil and the evil things good. The left, according to many passages that we're going to be getting into on today's program, they are not only invoking the judgment of God on America, they are actually orchestrating it.
And listen, I understand. Just to sort of play devil's advocate and put myself in the shoes of someone that I don't agree with, I understand, you know, the dream that we could have this wonderful utopia where there's no borders and there's no nations and we're all just one creed and one color and we just get along. You know, realistically, if you think about it, in the end goal, that is God's plan for His people. Okay. But if you are not of the Spirit of God, then you are of the spirit of the enemy. And Satan's goal has always been to redirect the worship of God to himself.
That's right.
And always been to mirror the plan of God it's sort of like a dark mirroring of what God wants to do with his people.
That's true. And the thing is this, like, so what you're saying is, he's saying he kind of understands the globalists and how what they actually want to do is create a unified world. But I completely do agree with your end point. It can't happen here. It cannot happen here on earth. Because here's the thing. Satan wants to have a kingdom like God. And God's kingdom is not going to go throughout the entire world before he comes back. It's just not. Whenever he sets up his throne in Jerusalem, that happens when he comes back. So any attempt before that is being led by the enemy. And the ultimate, see, here's the thing, what's crazy is that the globalists will one day succeed.
It's true.
Because we can bank on the Revelation scriptures that there will be an Antichrist that rules the entire world. So one day, the globalists will succeed, which is kind of a scary thought. And I often, you also need to have this kind of in mind. I often say, well, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, but really as a Christian, we're monarchists.
Yeah.
We really are. We serve a coming kingdom with a king. We are monarchists. But let me tell you, let's go back to this. I really want to dive into this article because it really is just, it's absolutely crazy. Trump declares himself a nationalist, and CNN says he is racist. Let me read some of the things from this article. So during last week's rally in Houston, President Trump declared himself a nationalist, which triggered CNN's Don Lemon, as well as many other unhinged leftists, into crying racist. Trump spoke about the unelected bureaucrats in the EU and then pivoted onto radical Democrats who, he said, want to turn back the clock and restore the rule of corrupt, power-hungry globalists. The president explained that a globalist is a person who wants the globe to do well, frankly, but not for our own country so much. That's a direct quote. We can't have that, Trump said, adding, they have a word. It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist. Use that word. And the left went berserk. Wow, Don Lemon said while laughing. We're going to talk about that word tonight. It is a favorite of the alt-right and is loaded with nativist and racial undertones. To love your country. This is all a plan. This is all a plan. They want you to hate America so that they can literally create a one world order. I'm telling you.
And let me jump in because
okay.
I do want to sort of address what he's talking about, the sort of history of this term. Because this is a term that was hijacked by an evil regime. Basically, when you consider Germany and Hitler, he basically said, this is your country, so you should do whatever I tell you to do because this is your country. It's not because there are certain ideals that we believe in or because of your family. It's because it's our country. The ideas that that you would think that our president would be anything but a nationalist is insane. That he would have any interest except for the people of this country is literally insane.
That's right. If you are a leader of a country and you're not a nationalist, there's something wrong with you. If you're the leader of a country and you don't have your people's best interests in mind, then you're not a leader. But I just want to go through, just to talk about this a little bit. Here's another quote from Don Lemon. And globalist, well, globalist has been used as a slur of sorts, sometimes even against those in the administration, often with anti-Semitic overtones. So now, if you're anti-globalist, you're a Jew hater. So if you don't want to have a one world order, you're a Jew hater. And if you're a nationalist, then it's an alt-right favorite with nativist and racial undertones. They are truly changing our words because now, if this is being taught from Hollywood, if this is being this is what the students in universities are being educated with, then they're going to scream, oh my gosh, no, I don't want to be a nationalist. They've completely rewritten our textbooks. I mean, they've completely rewritten it because let me tell you right now that all they show now in university textbooks is just America's warts. They don't share about the great things that America has done, and it's all a strategic plan. I want to read some of these just to, I mean, not to make you laugh, but just absurdity. Sometimes whenever you see something so crazy, you've just got to be like, man, they're insane. Here are some verified accounts on Twitter of what people have been saying over Trump, President Trump, and his nationalist comments. Robert Costa, what Trump did tonight is finally finish the rhetorical journey. He acknowledged what he's been the whole time, a nationalist, one of many in the world. As if like it's like, you know, it's like the craziest, how they're wording this is insane.
It's funny because the left is like, their whole game is rhetoric. I mean, they're always changing the definitions of what things mean. Just because, I mean, literally, like, you can't say terrorist anymore. They had to change the definitions, and now it's like, you're evil, racist bigot if you say terrorist. You can't say illegal immigrant or illegal alien when people, you know, technically can be illegal if they're in a place they're not supposed to be.
That's right.
You can't even say that anymore. It's like their whole game is changing the goalposts of what, like, language means and undermining it so that they can just find another reason to, you know, stab you over it.
Robert Reich on Twitter, the President of the United States openly identifies himself as a nationalist, calls for the jailing of his political opponents, attacks the press, and cozies up to dictators. While Republicans in Congress stand idly by, the stakes of this elections couldn't be higher for democracy. Here's another one. Wow, this is unsettling. Trump at his rally in Texas just proudly said that he's a nationalist. Let that sink in. Yeah, I'm letting it sink in. Of course I'm letting it sink in. That's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing that our president has our best interests in mind, that our president wants to keep his people number one.
It's a real change of pace because our last president wasn't a patriot. I mean, he literally, he didn't care about our country. He really did hold the interests of the world above our country. So
that's right. So why does the left hate American nationalism? Nationalism is in stark contrast with globalism, which that's what they want, which will lead to a new world order, literally. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. If you think this is a conspiracy, then you don't believe the Bible. Because the Antichrist, his system, whenever he inherits this system, there is a worldwide government in place. You got to understand that, which is a new world order, which is literally all of the world under one leader. This is the Antichrist. This is prophetic scripture. So nationalism is in stark contrast with globalism. You need to remember that, which will lead to a new world order. Basically, if you love your country, this is why they hate nationalism. If you love your country, then you're not going to be for globalism. That's as simple as that. And that's why there's an attack on loving your country. There is one thing in the way of a new world order, and that is a strong America. It is the left's goal to diminish America.
Exactly. And like, it really is spiritual. I mean, if you think, you know, for so long it was so confusing to me. Why is there an entire party that is founded on principles that inherently are going to hurt our country? Why would you have ideals and principles that would be against your own interest?
Yeah.
And the only explanation that I can find is that it's spiritual, that there is an end game, that we are moving towards a one world government, a new world order, and for that to happen, America has to be weak. That means economically, with, you know, the rise of socialism, and that means our borders saying, you know, there's this huge protest just a few months ago with Antifa where they're saying, you know, no borders, no borders. It is literally the goal of the radical left in our country to eliminate borders.
That's right. That's right. You can't have borders and the whole world be unified, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this next issue of this caravan. They're calling it a caravan of thousands of people. I think the number is 14,000 or even more, probably more by the time you're watching this. With it probably ultimately will be tens of thousands of people that are coming over to attempt to come into America before the midterm elections. But I just want to say this before Andrew gives us some of the details. This isn't something new. You need to get this, okay? What is happening on our southern border of these thousands and thousands of people attempting to get in, this isn't new. This is a microcosm of what has actually been happening on our southern border for years, for years. Now, it might not be 7, 14, 20,000 attempting to come across every day. I'm not saying that. But it is truly a microcosm. This happens every single day in America, with conservative estimates believing that there are actually right now in the United States over 12 million people that crossed our southern border illegally. And they're in America right now. So this is just a microcosm. Right now it's being politicized. Right now there's cameramen. Right now it's being staged. Right now. And like I said, there's a lot of money behind this. There's a lot of UN influence behind this. There's a lot of money from the left behind this. But this, I just want you to understand, this isn't something new. It's a microcosm. There's at least over 12 million people in the United States that are here illegally. And let me tell you what the goal of the left is. Complete amnesty for all. And the ultimate goal is voting rights for everyone. That's what it is. It's voting rights for all the illegals that will keep the Democrats in power.
That's true.
But tell us, Andrew, tell us what we're looking at right now on the southern border.
So let's talk about this caravan, because there has been a fair bit of misinformation about it. So it started in Honduras with 160 people and grew rapidly to 1,600 people before it broke through Guatemala's border. By the time it reached Mexico, it had amassed up to 7,000 people and growing. And, by the time they reach the border, who knows how many it really is going to be. Another bit of information, we know that President Trump is threatening to cut or reduce aid to Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala for not holding back the invasion. And, he's getting a lot of criticism about this. I think I heard on MSNBC, or maybe it was CNN, where they were saying that it's ridiculous that we would think to cut their aid, because that's the whole reason that, this exodus of people is coming to America in the first place. And that's just frankly ridiculous. I mean, first of all, to think that we could solve all the problems that are causing these people to move to America on our own, it's outrageous. I mean, these are governmental, social, political, economic issues that have lasted as long as we know these countries to have been in existence.
And we've given a lot of money to these countries.
And that's the point. I mean, to just break down how much money we're actually giving to these countries, between the time of 2001 and 2017, we've given Honduras alone over $127 million.
Wow.
That's about $7.5 million every year. El Salvador, in that same time period, almost $75 million. Guatemala, we've given them, a little bit more. Overall, it's almost $500 million that we've given in aid to these countries between the years of 2001 and 2017. So absolutely we should cut aid, because that's literally, we're giving $500 million to countries that have no care for our interests. And at some point it's got to pay off. We want to help other nations as much as we can, and I feel like the world kind of sees us as a father figure. People expect so much out of us, but there's only so much we can give. And this really does feel like a huge act of disrespect. I mean, you have this mass of people just running roughshod over your borders, and you know that they're headed for us, and you just let them through. And I think there should be some recompense for that.
I think that what's happening, we're going to get to it in the last couple of minutes of the program, that, like I said, the left is not only invoking the judgment of God on America, they're actually orchestrating it. You see, a lot of people think that judgment isn't coming to America because Donald Trump is president, okay? But you got to understand that we're still aborting 3,000 babies every day. The count is still nearly 70 million babies that have been aborted since Roe v. Wade in 73. I mean, the blatant perversion. We're the #1 exporter of pornography in the entire world. The perversion with the LGBTQ so on community. Yeah. I mean, just because President Trump is our leader, it doesn't mean that evil people haven't infiltrated every other element of leadership throughout the country. And so here's the thing, though. I want to talk about this as well. These refugees are coming to America. And you might not have heard this yet. These refugees are trying to come to America and claim political asylum, okay? Now, I want to talk about that definition real quick. The definition of political asylum is this: the protection granted by a nation to someone who has left their native country as a political refugee. In other words, they are escaping. They're escaping their country. Now, they're trying to claim political asylum here in the United States, and these are bogus political asylum attemptees. Let me tell you why. Because they qualify, this is the law, they qualify for asylum in the first country they visit next to theirs. This is bogus asylum claims. These are not legitimate asylum claims. If they are not the first country they came to after leaving their own country, they can't apply for political asylum here. Now, so here's the thing, is that they can actually truck up to America, but you actually have to claim political asylum in the countries next to yours first. So here's the thing. But instead of doing that, instead of going to, there are countries that are even closer than this, but let's just talk about nicer, a little bit more of nicer countries closer to them, like Costa Rica or Panama, which is literally 400 miles away, maybe almost 500 miles away for Panama. But yet instead, they want to travel over 2,000, maybe 2,500 miles to get to the United States. See, they're not escaping. If you were escaping, that's what you would do. You would escape. You would leave your country and escape to the next one over.
Yeah, and the point is that every border has a legal point of entry. I mean, any border you cross, there are points at which there's guards and everything, and they can vet you and allow you through. But they're not entering by legal points of entry. I mean, if you look at Guatemala, they tried to hold back this crowd, and eventually they just said, we don't have the resources, we don't care enough, we're going to let them through. They're just bulldozing through these borders. I mean, if they were doing what they really said they were doing, they would do it legally.
That's right. I have 5 points right here. I have this section called Additional Thoughts and Comments. So you've seen the caravan, and one of the most famous pictures is a man leading the caravan. And he is literally it's a huge pole, and he's carrying the flag proudly of Honduras. If you are carrying the flag of the country you are escaping from, you're not a refugee. Second point, if the people are calling President Trump, a Nazi, and literally calling him the Antichrist, and you don't believe this is political, then you are really mistaken. Let me tell you that. You are really mistaken. President Trump is saying that the migrants are not getting in, and he will send the military. That's another thing. I know as of just a few days ago, and it's probably more by now as well, there was almost 1,000 additional troops that President Trump has sent down to the border because this is an invasion. This is an invasion of our country. Here's also the thing. President of Mexico, in July, he was the president-elect of Mexico, he said in July that they would use migrant waves to break down the borders of the U.S. And Mexico right now, Mexico, on the border of Mexico and Guatemala, where these migrants crossed over, there are 10,000 Mexican troops. 10,000 Mexican troops that are completely armed, tanks lining a good portion of the border. They could have stopped it.
Absolutely.
But they didn't. See, this is all orchestrated, all orchestrated. And I want to make this point really quickly. We aren't against legal immigration. We are not. The key word is legal. I am absolutely for legal immigration. It's the term illegal. I identify so much with a quote from Teddy Roosevelt in 1907 that says this: in the first place, we should insist that if the immigrant who comes here in good faith becomes an American and assimilates to us, he shall be treated on an exact equality with everyone else. Assimilates to us. For it is an outrage to discriminate against any such man because of creed or birthplace or origin. Absolutely, completely agree. But this is predicated upon the man's becoming, in fact, an American and nothing but an American. There can be no divided allegiance here, like, say, carrying the Honduras flag of the country you're trying to escape from. There can be no divided allegiance here. Any man who says he's an American but something else also isn't an American at all. We have room for but one flag, the American flag, and this excludes the red flag, which symbolizes all wars against liberty and civilization, just as much as it excludes any foreign flag of a nation to which we are hostile. We have room for but one language here, and that is the English language. And we have room for but one sole loyalty, and that is the loyalty to the American people. He actually said that in 1919, and that is President Theodore Roosevelt. What is the goal of the left? Like I said, this is a microcosm of what's been going on. There's over 12 million illegal immigrants. I believe that the end game for the Democrats is to push for legislation on a federal level and throughout the state capitals across the country for illegal immigrants to be able to vote. And the goal is to make America into a giant welfare state, leaving the left and Democrats in power forever. Now, what does the Bible have to say about this? I would encourage you to read Deuteronomy 28. And actually, if you could just dedicate a half hour, read through it a few times if you really can, really can do that. In the first portion of Deuteronomy 28, it says this: if you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow his commands I give you today, the Lord your God will set you up on a place of a really high place above all the nations on the earth. And these blessings will come upon you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. And then it gives about 13 incredible blessings. And I want you to read through those 13 incredible blessings in Deuteronomy 28 and tell me if you think it sounds like America of the past. You're going to be astounded. You're really going to be astounded. The Lord will grant your enemies who rise up against you, they'll be defeated against you. They will come from you in many directions, but flee from you in 7. You will lend to many nations, but you will borrow from none. I mean, really, read through it. It really describes America. But then, there's over 50 verses of judgment where it says, if you once loved the Lord your God, and you could read that starting in verse 15 of Deuteronomy 28. If you once loved the Lord your God and followed his commandments, and you leave that way, he lists an incredible amount of judgments that will come upon that nation. And we're seeing some of them today. Deuteronomy 28:43 says, the alien who lives among you will rise above you higher and higher. And you, as a nationalist, you, as a lover of your country, it says, but you will sink lower and lower. It goes on, it says, he will be the head, but you will be the tail. Verse 49, the Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you will not understand, a fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or the petty. We don't have time to get into this right now. But I do believe President Trump, and a lot of different statistics you can read from 2014, 15, 16, and beyond, that there are a lot of people of the Middle Eastern descent that are also coming across our border, not just in the caravan, but for the years prior as well. You see, this is a sign of judgment. This is a sign of a judgment that God says will happen to the country that leaves his ways, that previously once loved him. It's not for a country that never knew him. This is talking about Israel. We can claim this for America today. That if you leave the ways of God, these are the judgments. You see, here's what I'm saying. The left is not just invoking the judgments of God on America. They're actually orchestrating it. They're saying, let's destroy the borders. Let's diminish America. It's time to wake up, people. It's time to wake up. Ask the Holy Spirit to give you eyes to see. Eyes to see. I just want to encourage you as we end the program today. I want to encourage you to get into your word. Get into your word. It's about intimacy with Jesus. If you don't know where to start in the book of Matthew. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Get the words of Jesus within your heart. Read the word, devour the word, devour the word. Because we're living in a day where it's increasingly becoming more and more and more and more important to be able to distinguish between the voice of truth, which is Jesus, and lies. We're living in a confusing day, but we can get through this if we remain close to Jesus. We'll see you next week.